Could I interest you in a really hard dark fantasy game in which you explore a place forsaken by gods, with death awaiting at every corner, potentially costing you hours of progress every time you perish? Oh, no, not that one. I meant the indie game. Okay, I feel like that was kind of my fault. I should have been more specific. I meant the indie one that's turn-based. Yes, I'm aware the thumbnail gave it away already, but let me have my fun, damn it. This one. It's this one. Welcome to Strig's Game Café, everyone. Have a cup of fear and hunger. So right off the bat, I will get the obvious out of the way. The game I'm gonna talk about today has a lot of disturbing moments and themes, which means I'm gonna have to blur a lot of stuff. Viewer discretion is advised. Fear and Hunger is an RPG Maker horror dungeon crawler developed by a single dev, Miro Haverinen, I hope I didn't butcher that one too badly, and published by Happy Paintings. It features a dark fantasy setting, and I do mean dark, we'll get there, don't worry, along with some survival horror and roguelike elements that help make each playthrough really unique. Like each one is its own self-contained tabletop campaign, just reusing the same setting. Fear and Hunger is also one of the most brutal games I've ever played. Less so in terms of mechanic execution, but insanely so in terms of game knowledge. Speaking plainly, I highly recommend playing this with the wiki open. Seriously, I know this is a thing for basically all those other games I mentioned, but trust me, it's twice as much a thing in this one. Because even when you have an idea of what to do, that doesn't guarantee you'll be able to do it. To better illustrate this point, I feel like I should talk about a few runs I've had and then slowly introduce the game's elements one by one. So, let's start from the beginning. When you start a new run, you pick one of 4 characters. The Mercenary Kahara, the Knight Dars, the Dark Priest Enki, or the Outlander Ragnvalder. Naturally, as with choosing classes in a tabletop RPG, each one has different skill sets, but the real meat of this choice lies in choosing the character's backstory. During the intro sequence, the game details what the life of your character was like before the game's story properly started. You can make a handful of choices here, and depending on what you pick, you can start with different skills and items. Not even 5 minutes in and it already feels like my choices will matter. Off to a great start. The intro also helps establish your character's reason for entering the dungeons of Fear and Hunger that give this game its name. All of them ultimately revolve around a man that has been imprisoned in this place. Legard, the leader of a band of mercenaries called the Knights of Midnight Sun. The mercenary was hired to find Legard for a handsome payment. The knight wants to free Legard as she was his second in command in the Knights of the Midnight Sun. The dark priest wants to learn more about Legard's involvement in a prophecy, and the Outlander wants revenge on Legard for attacking his village for an artifact they had and killing his wife and child. So, having made your choices, you set off. From now on, I'll mostly be talking about my runs in a first-person perspective, only changing back to explain any particular game mechanic. Starting my first run as a mercenary, I took a look around, checking every nook and cranny, like a good old-school RPG player should. And if you have similar habits, you'll be happy to know that Fear and Hunger heavily rewards this. You need every item you can find to brave these maddening halls, and it pays to increase your supplies every chance you can. On top of adding to the survival element of the game, this resource gathering is also one of the game's roguelike elements. You see these item drops from barrels and crates? They're different every time, changing even if you reload the same save and investigate the same places again. This goes for both your mundane items like food and health potions, as well as fighting pieces of equipment or books that you need for learning new skills and crafting items. It's a huge part of what makes runs so different. For example, maybe you get lucky and learn something like lockpicking early on. giving you access to doors and chests you would be locked out of using otherwise. Pun fully intended. Speaking of chests, they'll probably be your first use of the lucky coin mechanic. The lucky coin is tossed at certain moments during your exploration or combat, and is basically the same as a dice roll for a tabletop RPG. You pick heads or tails, and if you win, you get better loot and opportunities in battle. If you lose though, you get worse items or none at all, and get absolutely trashed by some of the worst effects of your enemy's attacks. Sometimes your life will truly be in the hands of fate, and you better pray that you don't get the wrong roll at the wrong time. Back to my run, I could hear the barking of dogs in the distance, and the game then explicitly told me it was getting closer. Well, that couldn't be good. Before anything bad ended up happening, I made a quick decision to enter the dungeons from the side. With the darkness in my vision, the emptiness in my stomach, and the sound of flies buzzing in the air, I descended the staircase. I managed to scavenge some mushrooms and herbs, and then went to search the crates to the north, even managed to find a plate helmet. However, my way up ahead was closed and could not be opened by lockpicking or with brute force. As a side note, I love that the game lets you try to break down doors in a turn-based battle. I just think it's neat. Then, while making my way back, a thing intercepted me in the dark. So, time to talk about Fear and Hunger's battle system. Unlike most turn-based RPGs, you typically won't encounter more than one enemy at a time. Instead, each enemy has multiple body parts that you can target, such as tentacles, arms, legs, torso, head, and others, if you catch my drift. Most enemies can be killed in one of two ways. Either destroy the torso or destroy the head. Torsos typically have higher HP, but are easier to hit. Heads, on the other hand, are more vulnerable due to less health, but have a way lower hit rate, often requiring that you destroy an enemy's center of balance, like legs and other things, before you can lop it off their neck. Hearing about this, you might think it's not that unreasonable of a task, but given that most enemies can absolutely go to town on you, especially at the start, you soon realize that combat in Fear and Hunger often feels like you're not playing to win, but rather to minimize your losses as much as you can, whether that be items you need to spend, allies that could die, and even down to every single health point you could lose to a foe. In my case, it quickly became apparent that this Maniba needed to have its tentacles cut before it could target the head. After winning the fight, I searched the Maniba, but it did not have anything. Not that I personally expected a tentacle monster to have anything of value on it. I then explore a bit more, fight another Maniba, and after unlocking the way back to where I came from, I proceed to get swallowed whole by the ground. In alien terrain, I'm forced to walk through the dark, occasionally being jump scared by this weird specter. But at least I find some dried mushrooms. Speaking of, this is the moment I realized I was getting hungry. Now, you might have noticed from this menu that along with my character's life meter, there are two others, mind and hunger. These two meters are basically the other namesake of this game besides the dungeons. So let me go over them very quickly. Just like the title, let's start with fear. So, all four starting characters will have one phobia assigned to them at random at the start of the game. Necrophobia, Phasmophobia, Rhabdophobia, Erotophobia, Zoophobia, or Teratophobia. There is a seventh one, Panophobia, the fear of everything, but it can't be assigned from the start. Rather, it replaces that character's regular phobia if you allow their mind gauge to reach 0. When faced with an enemy whose nature triggers your character's phobia, for example a minor specter for Phasmophobia or one of the naked cave dwellers for Erotophobia, that character gets the fear status effect, which means they have 50% less evasion rate and take 50% more damage. Last, but definitely not least, the mind gauge can be reduced by using spells in battle, getting hit with certain attacks from enemies, and also decreases on its own while exploring the dungeon's dark areas. This can be mitigated by using a torch, which also increases your sight radius slightly. On top of adding panophobia to your character and locking you out of spells, having a low mind gauge can also trigger certain companion events and make your party members attempt to leave. It can even cause them to suffer heart attacks and die. As for the protagonist you chose, if their mind gauge falls below 50, they'll learn a certain skill. Yeah, I don't think I need to say that using this results in a game over, do I? So, don't do it. With that, we've covered one half of the game's title. But what about the other half? Well, the hunger meter depletes slowly over time and you fill it back up by eating. You can find different food items searching around, like the aforementioned dried mushrooms, as well as moji bread, cheese, salami, cabbages, and others, with different food items reducing hunger by a set amount. However, if you allow your hunger to fall below specific thresholds, you start to get debuffs to your max health, then your attack, then you won't be able to walk and be forced into a crawl, then become affected by blindness, and finally, you die of starvation. So yeah, better keep everyone in your party well fed. After eating, I managed to find my way out of the weird sinkhole. Going up, I reach a room full of graves, some of which are freshly dug. Lovely. A few of them have inscriptions too, suggesting that at one point there were people in these dungeons to write them. Passing some large coffins, I collect more items and eventually reach a room with a bed. My first save point. Beds can be found all throughout the game, but there are two things to keep in mind. The first is that while you can save by sleeping, you're not gonna get a full heal like you would by sleeping at an inn does in most RPGs. Second is that beds also use the lucky coin mechanic. If you get the face right, you'll sleep and save your game as expected. If you get the wrong face though, you'll be woken up by an enemy, or in a handful of cases, even get an insta-kill, potentially losing hours of progress. Always be mindful of the bed you're laying in. Luckily, this one in particular is kind of a beginner's first bed. God, that feels weird to say. What I mean is, for the very first time you sleep here, you're guaranteed a good rest. Afterward though, I strongly suggest you don't stick around to find out. As soon as I go out, I see this. I didn't need anyone to tell me I was not surviving an encounter with this thing, so I kept away from it. Going north, I found another door I couldn't break, and instead of descending stairs. Nowhere to go but down, it seemed. At the bottom were the prison halls. The floor here was made of metal, making my footsteps echo in the darkness. There were a handful of cells here with doors that I could lockpick and more beds I could sleep in, though I did not dare try that at the time. I quickly found out that other creatures made their homes down here, like these flying cave gnomes. They weren't exactly durable, but they kept calling for reinforcements. And then, the worst thing happened. One of them bit me, and my arm was now infected. Being an RPG, Fear and Hunger is no stranger to status effects, as the aforementioned effects of the same names already show. However, Fear and Hunger are not the only threat this place and its inhabitants can inflict. Oh no. When a limb of yours, or a party member's, gets infected, a sort of countdown starts, based on how many location changes you go through rather than an actual timer. And from that point, there are a few things you can do. The primary way of getting rid of infections is by using green herbs, or items that derivate from them. And needless to say, these don't exactly grow anywhere. Your next best choice is equipping one of a handful of accessories, but they can't really be found in the early game, at least as far as I'm aware. Which brings me to the third option. There's an item you can find called a bone saw. If you can't heal the infected limb any other way, then your only hope is to... Once the deed is done, your character will have one less limb, as well as a bleeding wound status effect, which needs to be healed with a piece of cloth. And depending on the limb you lost, you also incur other effects like being unable to equip a shield after losing an arm, or losing movement speed after losing a leg. But why, you might ask? Why go so far because of an infection wound? Well, if you know about infections, you know they can be fatal. Remember that countdown I mentioned earlier? Well, if you traverse a certain number of rooms without treating a character's infection, that character is dead. And if it so happens to be your protagonist, that's game over, right then and there. Wanna know what the worst part is? Some areas are just infested with enemies that can infect you. The only silver lining is that you can just walk out of that area before curing the victim, since the stat doesn't use the actual elapsed time since you got it. And I suppose this is a good time as any to quickly go over a few other status effects. There are a lot of them though, and I'd rather not talk about every last one, but I have to say that they were part of the reason why I always kept the wiki list open as I played, since some of the icons aren't that obvious. Aside from the fear, hunger, and infection mechanics I talked about, you have pretty much all the usual RPG status effects you know and love. You have your usual poison, burn, stun, and of course, severe anal bleeding. Don't ask me how you get that one, just don't. Back to my run, I did not have any idea how to deal with the status effect, or any of the knowledge I just gave to you, really. But even if I had known, I did not possess anything that could help my infected arm. Little did I know, I would not have to worry about that very long and that the choice would be made for me. Because as soon as I rounded the corner, I was intercepted by a hulking mass of flesh known as a prison guard. I then proceeded to make the rookie mistake of being too distracted by this thing's stinger and trying to cut it off, instead of the hand holding a giant meat cleaver. A mistake that the guard quickly rewarded by chopping my infected arm straight off. I ultimately managed to win the fight by clutching an evasion against an attack that would have ended me and getting a shot at the head. Searching the guard's body, I get his meat cleaver and his loincloth. I then somehow find a piece of cloth to heal my bleeding. Maybe my leg was beginning to turn around. Turning a lever that did something somewhere else, I then proceeded to realize that my path was blocked by yet another door that wouldn't budge, and a second prison guard. I try to slip past, but it's no use. This time, I take out the cleaver arm first, but that's when I make my second mistake. Due to a pop-up, I prioritize the stinger instead of the second arm, which gives the guard an opening to attack me. And this time, I don't get a lucky dodge. Get used to this screen. You'll be seeing a lot of it if you choose to play Fear and Hunger after watching this video. Before I give you my thoughts on the game in general, let me give you an idea of what some of my subsequent runs were like. Right after this first run, I tried again as the knight, this time entering the dungeons through the front door. After finding some food items in a small kitchen, I came across a message in guest book, speaking of the horrors of this place and how the writer has become a part of it. He ends by telling whoever's reading to leave this place if it's still possible. Below the guest book is a book of fears which I take with me. I resume my exploration and 2 rooms later a guard sees me. Once again I make the mistake of not taking out the guard's right arm, not yet understanding that this body part is what leads to the mad rush attack. Miraculously, I survive and take off the guard's head. I get the guard's meat cleaver and loincloth. Like, who the fuck takes one look at this thing and thinks it's a good idea to deliberately steal its loincloth? The room doesn't have much of note save for a list of inmates on the table. The room to the right, however, contains a cage with a crying girl. Normally, I would be wary of little girls in horror video games, but if the cage was guarded, then I assumed she could not be part of the evils of this place. I mean, come on, the game wouldn't be that mean asking me to free her only to hurt me right after, would it? Well, in hindsight, it absolutely would. I just think it so happens that this is the one situation where it doesn't try to fuck you over. Since the cell was locked, I needed to find a key somewhere. I searched the bookshelves in the room above, but they don't have anything of interest save for a mock-up book. Going down the corridor on the left, I saw another guard and immediately backed up, as I was in no condition to fight. This meant my only path for now was through the metal doors. They led me to a courtyard with... well, that's gonna be a pain to edit. Aside from all those zombie-like guys hanging around, there was a well I did not want to jump into. Some more food, a door I couldn't open because it was blocked by magic, and the second metal door I could open. Inside, I met with chanting occultists dressed in all black. I kill one of them and just barely avoid the armored guard, entering a small corridor that ended up in a library. I searched the bookshelves, but my biggest find here is the Dark Priest. Yes, the same Dark Priest you can pick as a playable character. See, when you select a protagonist, the other 3 picks don't just vanish. You can find them inside the dungeon at different locations, and they can even be recruited if you complete certain conditions. In this case, I did not have the item that was necessary to recruit the priest, though I wasn't even aware of that yet, so I just ended up making him mad at me. However, I did end up finding a small key in the room below, meaning I could go back and save the girl. So that is what I did, and the girl was now a party member. Fun fact, you can actually use the talk skill with your party members to get some fun interactions. Old school RPG style. I just think that's really nice. We then jumped down the well in the courtyard, which led to a locked room with some treasure in the section I had explored before of the Mercenary. Huh, things are looking up. We left the area through the graveyard, got some supplies by snooping around, and slept in the bed to save. Going back down to the prison hall, there's no way to open the door since we can't lockpick like the Mercenary could. One door was open, and in it was a deranged prisoner. I ordered the girl to guard, and figuring that its lack of leg support would make this thing's head fall easier, went straight for a neck chop. It worked, but the prisoner actually kept fighting without its head. To add insult to injury, or injury to more injury I guess, it infects one of my legs and gives the little girl a nasty bleed. I cure her with a cloth, but I can't heal my own infection for now. Going through a staircase leading up took us to the blood pit. There's just no way I can even blur this one. And if you've ever played this game before, I know what you're thinking. Next, you'll say, I bet he died to that, didn't he? As you watch me desperately attempt to escape my impending death to no avail, let me use this opportunity to briefly mention this game's sound design. In case you haven't noticed, I haven't actually used a whole lot of songs from Fear and Hunger in this video. And that's because most of the game opts for ambience rather than a full soundtrack. Save for rare occasions like the fight with the beheaded wizard, whose name is Nazra by the way. For the majority of the time, you will instead be subjected to howling winds, cavernous atmosphere, and the occasional sound of something moving in the dark. And even your own footsteps. And while it makes for poor sound design for this video, it works phenomenally for your immersion, creating an atmosphere of anxiety even when things are supposedly going well for you. Like the dungeon itself is telling you, don't let your guard down. With my first run as the knight done for, the Dark Priest was up next. Once more, I entered through the front door, though this time the kitchen door was closed to me, and being the feeble-bodied mage I was, I could not break it. To the north was a standing guard, so I decided to go back and explore the right side of the floor instead. This quickly proves to be the right choice, as I find shark teeth, a far better weapon than my starting one. And then immediately after, it proved to also be the wrong choice, as I got blocked by a guard. Oh, and what's that? My physically weak character started with teratophobia, making me even weaker against this guard. Superb. I cut off the cleaver arm, but the thing kills me next turn anyway. That was like 3 whole paragraphs of the script dedicated to this run. I'm still in shock at how shit it was. Except, this isn't really game over. If you lose to the guards here, there's a chance you'll be thrown into the blood pit. Rather, my problem was something else. Can you hear me move around even though the screen is frozen? Yeah, that's a weird bug that can happen sometimes. I did find a thread that gave me a few clues on how to solve it by editing one particular text file. The link will be in the description, and it hasn't happened to me since. But as for this run, yeah, even if the guard didn't kill me, this bug did. The only character I hadn't played yet was the Outlander, and it was at this point that I decided to keep a single wiki tab open, just in case I wanted to research something. I use it like one would use a dictionary, not to read it from cover to cover, but as a consultation when you need something really specific. See, one thing I'm a bit divided on when it comes to how Fear and Hunger displays information is that outside of character equipment, you don't really get raw numbers and data for anything, like how much hunger is replenished by each food item and how much each potion heals. On one hand, I do think not knowing made me more willing to learn by taking risks, and accept that it would be a while before I got wise enough to get a good run. But at the same time, having to keep the effects of items and what certain stat symbols mean in memory is honestly less of a fun way for the game to challenge me, and more of a chore. I kinda wish the game treated it like it treats item crafting recipes. Have a value that remains hidden to the player until they use an item for the first time in a run. For example, the heal value of the light blue vial would remain hidden from me until I use it for the first time. And after that, the description would show that it heals 80 HP for the rest of my run. Some of the books you can find have that same issue too. The first time I got a book of enlightenment, I accidentally wasted it thinking it was like a skill or spell book. The description is really vague and doesn't help one bit. Now, I did get the hang of things eventually, thanks to consulting the wiki, but while I do like learning stuff from visiting community hubs of games I like, especially RPGs, part of me does wish the game explained a few things better. Some memorization would still be required, of course, but at least then I'd be memorizing stuff I learned just by playing the game. And as I said previously, knowing what to do in this game doesn't mean you'll be able to do it anyway, thanks to all the randomizing, coin tosses, and RNG. I mention this because this was the run where I really started improving. I stopped making the same mistakes all the time, I kept an eye out for valuable items, and the Outlander's base stats allowed me to get through a few early fights more easily. Entering through the front door, I went right and ended up fighting a guard. This time I finally take out both arms, getting through the fight with less damage than usual. However, I then got attacked by a prisoner who infected one of my arms and one of my legs. I got lucky after that though, finding an alchemy book to craft stuff and the scroll of lockpicking, which permanently gives me that ability even though I'm not playing as the mercenary. Getting this ability this early would be a big help, and also allowed me to go back and rescue the girl. Past the courtyard, in the area with the cultists, I also found a book of the forgotten memories. Oh, this one's interesting. Remember the choices you make in each character's intro? You basically sacrifice some starting skills for others when you choose certain backgrounds. A book of the forgotten memories, however, will gift you one of the background skills from paths you didn't take. I really like the idea behind this item, and since it's decently rare, it never felt like it was broken. Reaching another courtyard, I found a dagger on the ground, which I then gave to the girl so she could fight. I later learned that, in fact, this was one of the only 2 weapons she can use in the entire game. And in all honesty, giving a dagger to a small child for use might actually be one of the least screwed up things you end up doing in this game. I also prayed to a statue and talked to a guy who wants to turn into a butterfly. Not gonna elaborate any further on that one. Back inside, I started to walk through another path when... Well, that was a close call. Entering the room up above... Nope. I went to the right instead, forcing me to fight my second guard. After which, I discover a torture room with a skinning knife on one of the tables, which lets you skin certain enemies, basically for clothing materials. Going up, I heard footsteps and braced myself for a fight, except this wasn't an enemy, but an actual sane person. This is Buckman, and there's an entire optional objective involving him and his companions who got lost in the dungeons. I never actually completed it though, so I'm afraid I'll skip the details on this one. But he tells me to get rid of a torturer who lives in these halls. I slept on the bed next to him, unknowingly dodging an insta-kill, and then went to deal with the madman by ambushing him in his own room, which granted me a key to the lower floors and... Yeah, there's no way this isn't referencing Silent Hill. Going downstairs, I found myself back in the blood pit, through less violent methods this time around. Unfortunately though, I was then promptly ambushed by a lizard man and died. Good news though is that I still had my save right before my death, and overall the conditions of this run were still pretty good at the time. So rather than starting a new run, I decided to continue my present one. This video is already big enough as it is, however, so I'll just tell you a handful of events that happened in my continuation attempts. I tried to avoid the lizard man by jumping down the pit. Yeah, that did not go well. I found the mercenary in the prison hall and he agreed to come with me. I also found a small doll which made the little girl very happy. Immediately after leaving the prison hall, the mercenary leaves, having stolen some of my coins. I got deep into a mine shaft, disturbed the grave, and then proceeded to get mauled to death by a living armor and its spectral twin. I die. I bought a potion of full healing from a merchant who appeared all the way back at the entrance and who vanishes mysteriously after the transaction. If you know, you know. Back in the basement, I was ambushed by an elite guard who kills the little girl and then the Outlander. I die. I found a mutant wolf called Moonless and brought her to my side by feeding her rotten meat. I don't even care that she attacks random targets and can't use equipment. Moonless is one of the best characters in this game, and I refuse to not take her in my runs ever since. I got ambushed by a yellow mage who ripped all of my limbs out one by one, forcing me to quit breathing. I die. After losing an arm, I found a knight being beaten down by cave dwellers and saved her. I discovered a literal mouth of the abyss, apparently belonging to the god of the depths, along with an ancient artifact, the same one stolen from the Outlander's village. After unfortunately losing Moonless to an encounter with a nasty enemy, I ended up recruiting the Dark Priest, and soon after, I found Lagarde, already dead. Yeah, turns out you have a limited amount of time to reach him, or you find him like this. But the game isn't over just yet. I went back to the entrance of the dungeons in order to escape, and that gave me my very first ending for Fear and Hunger. And when I say first, I mean there are several others, which meant I had more to see, which meant that I had to go back. So I started further runs, some of which ended in failure, and others that were worth continuing. And eventually, armed with my accumulated knowledge, I managed to go farther than ever before. One thing was clear by this point: I was in too deep to quit now. However, this is where my run descriptions end for now, I'm afraid. I'm not avoiding spoiling what's below solely to preserve your experience should I somehow have convinced you to try out this game, but also because, as of writing this script, I still haven't managed to get any of the other endings. I'm close, oh so close, but not quite there yet. So why did I choose to talk about this game right now? Well, to put it simply, it's because this hard, unforgiving and unfair game convinced me to keep playing long after this video goes up. You see, based on a few of my earlier comments, you might think that I got impatient with Fear and Hunger or that I dislike it. I assure you, this is not the case. It might come as a surprise, but I have a bit of a personal anecdote. In my last 2 years of college, there were 2 games that helped me relieve stress. These games were Hollow Knight and Cuphead. No, I'm not joking. I completed both Hollow Knight and Cuphead in the same year over the course of several months. I can't even explain it fully. I only know that having these games constantly test my abilities and technical skills was something that helped me get deeply immersed and also deeply satisfied. The difference here being that while Hollow Knight and Cuphead made me overcome mostly mechanical hurdles related to the actions I could perform, what Fear and Hunger required of me was to gather information about what tools I could use in my favor, a task which was also sped up by reading about the game online. In other words, the game gave me a knowledge check rather than a skill check. It actually reminds me a lot of Shin Megami Tensei 3 really, and I don't just mean the overall difficulty, but how the game sometimes decides to throw you and the only way to avoid it is to wisen up to the things it can do to you. And even when it comes to other games with roguelike or roguelite traits, I think the focus on this aspect is typically so rare, it genuinely makes Fear and Hunger worthy of mention. I once created a new save in the first Hades after clearing the game once, and I almost got to the end of a run on my very first try, with no upgrades at all, thanks to the mechanics I had learned on my first save. My point is, if I tried the same with Fear and Hunger, it would probably take a lot more time. Both because of the luck component, which is far more pronounced here, as well as the fact that at some point in these dungeons, I would be ambushed by an enemy in a spot I wouldn't expect. Or maybe I would get a bad coin toss in combat or while searching for items. In other words, somewhere along the way, I would probably see something I never encountered before. And that something would have a very real possibility of causing me to slip up and end the run beyond the point where I could solve things by reloading my save. At the same time though, getting past these obstacles is the part where the game makes you feel really good. Whether it be a good run where you get farther than ever and see parts of the dungeon that had remained hidden from you until now, learning advanced alchemy to craft better healing items, or even the simple act of using a bear trap to start a hard fight with an advantage. Every time you do it, you conquer the fear. You resist the hunger. You brave the darkness. You prove, little by little, that in this world of unfathomably powerful entities, death and despair, you can still survive through it all. Now mind you, this is even without mentioning the actually really cool lore, with a handful of Berserk inspiration here and there, the books you can discover revealing different aspects of world building, the little pieces of dialogue and events that happen between you and your party at certain locations, the side quests, the optional bosses, the dating sim? And so much more. And yes, I'm very well aware, given the dark themes, this is most definitely not a game I can recommend to just about anyone. Still, if you like old school RPGs, roguelike survival games, or any combination of those, and wish to test your own humanity, the doors are open for you. As for me, well, I suppose I too am a part of these dungeons now. My name is Strig, and thank you for your patronage. If you're leaving already, please consider leaving a tip in the form of a comment and a like. And if you'd like to come back, don't forget to subscribe and ring the notification bell on your way out. Thank you for visiting Strig's Game Café.